My husband told his mother in Korean that he got my best friend pregnant, but they didn't know I was fluent. When I finally spoke in Korean, their faces went white. I'm Emma Park, 32 years old, and I've spent the last 6 months of my marriage living a carefully constructed lie. Not my lie, though. Theirs. My husband Daniel and his mother have been speaking freely in Korean right in front of me for half a year, discussing the most devastating betrayal of my life as casually as one might discuss the weather. They assumed I was just another clueless American wife who couldn't understand a word. They were wrong. The moment everything changed happened on a Tuesday evening in March. Daniel and I were hosting his mother, Mrs. Park, for dinner at our townhouse in Seattle. She'd come over twice a week since we got married 3 years ago, always with that practiced smile that never quite reached her eyes. That night, we were having bulgogi that she'd insisted on preparing herself, because according to her, I could never season Korean food properly no matter how many times she showed me. I was setting the table when I heard it. Daniel's voice, low and tense, speaking rapid Korean to his mother in the kitchen. I'd been studying Korean secretly for 18 months by then, using every spare moment when Daniel was at work or traveling for his tech company. What started as an attempt to connect with his culture had become my window into a nightmare. "Yama, I don't know what to do," Daniel said in Korean. Rachel is 3 months pregnant now. She's getting impatient. Rachel, my best friend since college, the woman who'd been my maid of honor, who came to our house for wine nights, who I'd confided in about everything, including the difficulties Daniel and I were having trying to conceive. Mrs. Park's response was chillingly calm. "You need to be careful, Daniela. Emma cannot find out yet. Not until we figure out how to handle this properly. Rachel understands she needs to stay quiet. Yes? She's starting to show. She wants me to leave Emma and acknowledge the baby publicly." "Absolutely not," Mrs. Park hissed. "Think about your reputation, your career. We'll figure something out, but you need to keep both women under control right now." My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped the stack of plates I was holding. The crash would have given me away, so I set them down carefully on the dining table, each movement deliberate, buying myself time to breathe, to think, to decide what to do with this information that had just detonated my entire life. I could have confronted them right then. Part of me wanted to storm into that kitchen and scream, but something stopped me. Maybe it was the calculating coldness in Mrs. Park's voice. Maybe it was the realization that Daniel had been lying to my face every single day, while I'd been desperately trying to get pregnant myself, going through painful fertility treatments that he knew about and supported or pretended to support. Instead, I made a different choice. I wiped my eyes quickly, straightened my posture, and walked into the kitchen with a bright smile plastered on my face. "Dinner smells amazing, Mrs. Park," I said in English, my voice steady despite the earthquake happening inside my chest. "Can I help with anything?" Daniel and his mother exchanged a quick glance. Mrs. Park's expression shifted instantly to warm hospitality. No, dear. You just relax. We're almost ready." That was the first night I sat through dinner making small talk while my marriage crumbled silently around me. Daniel asked about my day at the elementary school where I taught 4th grade. I told him about the student art project we were starting. Mrs. Park complimented the way I'd arranged the flowers on the table, though I caught her murmuring to Daniel in Korean that they were positioned incorrectly according to proper tradition. They had no idea I understood every word. Over the following weeks, I became a detective in my own life. Every conversation Daniel had with his mother in Korean, I absorbed. Every seemingly casual comment Rachel made when we met for coffee, I analyzed with new eyes. The fertility appointments I'd been attending alone because Daniel was too busy with work suddenly made sense. He didn't want to get me pregnant because he'd already gotten someone else pregnant. The affair had been going on for over a year. It started at my own birthday party, of all places, when I'd asked Rachel to help Daniel plan a surprise for me. They'd apparently found their own way to celebrate. The pregnancy wasn't planned, but Rachel had decided to keep it, and she wanted Daniel to leave me and be a family with her. Mrs. Park had a different plan. She wanted Daniel to stay married to me for appearances while financially supporting Rachel and the child secretly. In her view, I was the acceptable wife, the proper American teacher who made Daniel look good to his colleagues and fit well into Seattle society. Rachel was Korean American like Daniel, which Mrs. Park preferred culturally, but Rachel's family wasn't wealthy or connected enough to meet her standards for a proper marriage. I was the trophy wife for show. Rachel was the mother of her grandchild, and I was the fool who was supposed to remain oblivious to all of it. But I wasn't oblivious anymore, and I wasn't going to remain silent forever. I was going to wait, gather every piece of information I needed, and when the moment was right, I was going to speak Korean for the first time in front of them. I was going to watch their faces as they realized I'd heard everything. Every cruel word, every calculated plan, every assumption that I was too stupid or too ignorant to understand. That moment was coming soon, very soon. I just had to be patient a little while longer. The dinner conversations continued. Daniel would ask his mother in Korean about how to keep Rachel calm. Mrs. Park would advise him in Korean about managing me, about keeping me hopeful about our fertility treatments, about making sure I never suspected anything. And I would sit there, smiling, nodding when appropriate, playing the role of the oblivious American wife perfectly. At night, Daniel would hold me and tell me he loved me. He'd kiss my forehead and promise that we'd have a baby soon, that the treatments would work eventually, and I would lie there in the dark. My Korean language learning app open on my phone under the pillow, practicing phrases I might need, building my vocabulary, preparing for war while pretending to make love. Rachel started avoiding me around week 5 of my silent observation. She claimed she was busy with work, but I knew the real reason. Her pregnancy was showing more, and she was terrified I'd notice. When we did meet, she wouldn't look me directly in the eyes. She'd fidget with her coffee cup and cut our our meetup short. The guilt was eating at her, but not enough to confess, never enough to do the right thing. I wanted to hate her. Part of me did, but another part of me understood that she was just as much a pawn in Mrs. Park's games as I was. Daniel was the one who'd made vows to me. Daniel was the one who'd promised to forsake all others. Daniel was the one who watched me inject fertility hormones into my stomach every morning while he was actively trying to have a baby with someone else. The cruelest part was watching Mrs. Park play the devoted mother-in-law. She'd bring me Korean skincare products and tell me they'd help me look younger. She'd suggest dietary changes that might improve my fertility, all while knowing exactly why I wasn't getting pregnant. She'd pat my hand sympathetically when I mentioned another failed cycle, her eyes full of fake compassion. In Korean to Daniel, she'd say, "At least Emma is trying. It's not her fault she's inadequate, but she makes a good wife otherwise." Inadequate. That word in Korean, bujuk-julhan, became my motivation. I'd show them exactly how adequate I was, how capable, how dangerous an underestimated woman could be when she decided to fight back. I started documenting everything, recorded conversations on my phone, carefully positioned to catch their Korean discussions, screenshots of text messages between Daniel and Rachel that I'd found on his laptop one night when he'd left it unlocked, bank statements showing transfers to an account I didn't recognize, which I later discovered was Daniel's secret account for supporting Rachel. I contacted a divorce attorney, Diana Chen, who came highly recommended for handling complex cases involving international families and hidden assets. I met with her during my lunch breaks at school, telling Daniel I was attending extra training sessions for new curriculum standards. "You need to be absolutely certain before we proceed," Diana told me during our third meeting. "Once we file, there's no taking it back. Are you sure you want to end your marriage?" I looked at her directly. "My marriage ended the moment my husband decided to sleep with my best friend. I'm just the last one to acknowledge it officially." Diana nodded. "Then let's make sure you're protected, financially, legally, and emotionally. We're going to need evidence of adultery and fraud. Can you get that?" I smiled. "I can get you everything you need, and I can get it in 2 languages." That's when I told her about the Korean conversations I'd been secretly understanding and recording for months. Diana's eyes widened with professional appreciation. "Emma, this is going to give us incredible leverage. They've essentially been planning fraud and deception right in front of you, documenting their own conspiracy. When we present this in court or even in negotiation, they won't have a leg to stand on." "I don't want revenge," I clarified. "I just want out with my dignity and my fair share. And I want them to know that I knew, that I understood everything, that they underestimated me. Trust me," Diana said. "When we're done, they'll know." We scheduled the reveal for Thanksgiving. It was perfect timing. Daniel's entire family would be gathered at Mrs. Park's house for the traditional celebration she hosted every year. Rachel would be there too, since Mrs. Park had started including her in family events under the guise of her being my friend who needed support during the holidays. The pregnancy would be undeniable by then. Rachel would be 6 months along, and I would finally speak. "Would you like me to continue?" The months between March and November felt like living in a carefully constructed stage play, where I was both audience and performer. Every day required Oscar-worthy acting. Every night demanded steel-reinforced emotional control. But I'd made my decision, and I was going to see it through to the final curtain. In April, Rachel finally told me she was pregnant. We were meeting for lunch at our usual spot, a small cafe near the hospital where she worked as a nurse. She'd been avoiding me for weeks, and when she finally agreed to meet, she looked exhausted and terrified. I need to tell you something," she said, her hands wrapped around her coffee cup so tightly her knuckles were white. "I'm pregnant." I arranged my face into surprised delight. "Rachel, that's wonderful. I didn't even know you were seeing anyone seriously. Who's the father?" She couldn't meet my eyes. "It's complicated. He's married. I know how that sounds, but Emma, I love him. We're going to be together. He's going to leave his wife." The audacity of sitting across from me and saying these words while I was the wife in question was almost impressive. I wanted to throw my coffee in her face. Instead, I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "Rachel, are you sure about this? Married men who cheat rarely leave their wives. I don't want you to get hurt." She finally looked at me then, and I saw something flicker in her eyes. Guilt, shame, fear. "He will. I know he will. He loves me." "Does his wife know?" I asked, keeping my voice gentle and concerned. "Not yet. We're waiting for the right time." I nodded sympathetically. "Just be careful, Rach. You're my best friend. I don't want to see you become a secret." The irony wasn't lost on me. I was already the secret, the wife being kept in the dark, the obstacle to be managed and eventually discarded. But Rachel didn't know that I knew. No one did except Diana, my attorney, and Dr. Michelle Reeves, the therapist I'd started seeing to help me process the betrayal without breaking down in front of Daniel. "Your anger is valid," Dr. Reeves told me during one of our weekly sessions, "but the way you're channeling it, turning it into strategic action rather than impulsive reaction, that's incredibly healthy. Just make sure you're not suppressing so much that you'll explode later." "I won't explode," I assured her. "I'll detonate, but on my timeline, not theirs." At home, Daniel's behavior became increasingly erratic. He'd be attentive one day, bringing me flowers and suggesting we go out for dinner. The next day, he'd be distant and irritable, snapping at me over minor things. I realized he was being torn between guilt over betraying me and resentment that I existed as an obstacle to his new family. The Korean conversations with his mother intensified. Mrs. Park was pressuring him to make a decision. Rachel was pressuring him to leave me. And Daniel was stuck in the middle, too cowardly to make a choice. One night in May, I overheard them talking on the phone. Daniel was in his home office, door closed, speaking quietly, but I'd learned to position myself outside doors, in hallways, anywhere I could catch fragments of conversation. "Iyama, I can't do this anymore," Daniel said in Korean, his voice strained. "Emma wants to try another round of fertility treatments. She's so hopeful. How can I look at her face and pretend?" "You pretend because you must," Mrs. Park replied sharply. "You made this mess, Daniel. You fix it. But you do not destroy your career and reputation by leaving your wife or your pregnant mistress like some kind of American trash television show. What about what Rachel wants? What about my child? Your child will be taken care of. Financially, you'll provide. But officially, this baby doesn't exist. Rachel will raise it alone. Or she'll find another man to marry and give the child a name. But you stay married to Emma until we figure out a better solution. That's not fair to Rachel, or to Emma, or to me." "Fair?" Mrs. Park's laugh was bitter. "Life isn't fair, Daniela. Fair is a fairy tale Americans tell themselves. You made adult choices. Now you deal with adult consequences. And the consequence is you stay married to your acceptable wife and support your child secretly. That's the only way to preserve everything we've built. What they'd built. Not what Daniel had built, but what his mother had built through him. The successful son with the good job and the nice American wife who taught adorable children. The perfect immigrant success story." Mrs. Park had worked 2 jobs to put Daniel through college, sacrificed everything for his education and opportunities. In her mind, he owed her the picture-perfect life she'd envisioned. I was just a prop in that picture. And Rachel's baby was an inconvenience that needed to be hidden. But I wasn't going to be a prop anymore. In June, I did something that surprised even myself. I reached out to Rachel's mother, Patricia Lynn. We'd met a few times over the years at various events, and she'd always been kind to me. I invited her for coffee, claiming I was worried about Rachel and wanted another perspective. "She seems stressed lately," I told Patricia. "She mentioned she's pregnant, but she's being so secretive about the father. I'm worried he's not treating her right." Patricia sighed heavily. "Rachel won't tell me who he is either. She insists everything's fine, but I know my daughter. She's unhappy, anxious. She's made a mistake with this man, whoever he is. Has she told you anything about him?" "Only that he's married and planning to leave his wife. But Rachel's 5 months along now, and I don't see any divorce proceedings happening. I think she's being strung along, and it's breaking my heart." I felt a pang of genuine sympathy for Patricia. She was another victim in this mess, a mother who was about to discover her daughter had betrayed her daughter's best friend, but I needed to plant seeds. "Maybe when she's ready, she'll tell us both the truth," I said gently. "Until then, all we can do is support her." Patricia nodded, but I could see the worry in her eyes. "Emma, if you find out who this man is, will you tell me? I need to know if my daughter is involved with someone dangerous or manipulative. I'll tell you, I promised. When the time is right, I'll make sure you know everything." The fertility treatments Daniel was supposedly supporting me through continued, except I'd stopped taking the hormones in April. I told Dr. Susan Walsh, my fertility specialist, the truth about what I'd discovered. She was professional enough not to comment on the situation, but sympathetic enough to work with me. "We'll do the appointments," Dr. Walsh said. "We'll document everything, but we won't actually proceed with treatments. This way, if your husband asks, you can honestly say you've been attending all scheduled appointments." It was another layer of deception, but necessary. Daniel needed to believe I was still desperately trying to get pregnant while he actively worked to impregnate someone else. The irony would be delicious when everything came out. In July, Mrs. Park made a mistake that gave me the final piece of evidence I needed. She invited me to lunch, just the 2 of us, at an upscale Korean restaurant in Bellevue. I should have been suspicious immediately, since she rarely spent time alone with me, but I was curious about her agenda. Over banchan and bibimbap, she made her move. "Emma, I know the fertility treatments haven't been successful," she began, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "Have you considered that maybe it's not meant to be? Some women aren't meant to be mothers." I kept my face neutral while rage burned through my veins. "We're still trying. Dr. Walsh says there's no medical reason we can't conceive. It just takes time." "Perhaps," Mrs. Park said delicately, "but Daniel is my only son. He wants to be a father. I want grandchildren. If you cannot give him that, maybe you should consider whether this marriage is fair to him." She was suggesting I leave Daniel, voluntarily, clearing the way for Rachel and the baby without Daniel having to be the bad guy who abandoned his wife. It was coldly strategic, and it almost would have worked if I didn't know the whole truth. "Are you asking me to divorce your son, Mrs. Park? I'm asking you to think about what's best for everyone. Daniel loves you, but love isn't always enough. Children are important in Korean culture. Family continuation is sacred. If you cannot provide that, perhaps someone else can." "Someone else already has," I thought but didn't say. Instead, I smiled sadly. "I appreciate your honesty, Mrs. Park, but Daniel and I are committed to our marriage. We're going to keep trying. I'm not giving up on us." Her face tightened imperceptibly. She'd expected me to crumble, to maybe even agree that I was inadequate. Instead, I pushed back politely but firmly. She wasn't used to me having a spine. After lunch, I met with Diana and played her the recording I'd made on my phone. Mrs. Park's suggestion that I leave Daniel because of fertility issues, combined with the knowledge that Daniel had already gotten another woman pregnant, painted a clear picture of conspiracy and emotional manipulation. "This is gold," Diana said, shaking her head in amazement. "She essentially admitted they want you gone so the other woman can move in. Combined with the affair evidence and the financial records you've gathered, we have an incredibly strong case. What about the Korean recordings? Can we use those?" "Absolutely. You had every right to understand conversations happening in your own home about your own marriage. There's no expectation of privacy when they're literally talking in front of you. The fact that they assumed you couldn't understand doesn't protect them legally." I nodded, feeling the pieces fall into place. Everything was ready. I just had to make it to Thanksgiving. August brought an unexpected complication. My father called from Florida, where my parents had retired 2 years earlier. year. Dad had been diagnosed with early-stage cancer, treatable but serious. Mom was beside herself with worry. I flew down immediately, telling Daniel I'd be gone for a week to help them navigate treatment options. What I didn't tell him was that I also needed the space to breathe, to step away from the suffocating pretense of my marriage, and just be someone's daughter for a few days. "You look tired, sweetheart," Dad said during one of his treatment planning appointments. "Is everything okay with Daniel?" I almost broke then. Almost told my father everything, but I held back. I didn't want him worrying about my marriage while fighting cancer. He had enough to deal with. "We're fine, Dad. Just a lot going on with work and the fertility stuff." Mom wasn't as easy to fool. "Emma Caroline Taylor, I've known you for 32 years. Something's wrong. You don't have to tell me now, but when you're ready, I'm here." I hugged her tightly. "I know, Mom. There are some things I need to handle when I get home. Big things, but I promise I'm okay." "Are you sure?" "I'm sure. And Mom, whatever happens in the next few months, know that I'm making the right choices for me, even if they seem hard to understand." She pulled back and looked at me seriously. "You're leaving him, aren't you?" I nodded slowly. "How did you know?" "Because I've seen that look before. It's the same look I had on my face 30 years ago when I left your biological father. That determination mixed with grief. You're mourning something that's already dead while preparing to walk away from the corpse." I'd never heard Mom talk about my biological father. She'd married my dad, the man I called father, when I was 2. I had no memories of anyone else. Was it hard? Leaving? Hardest thing I ever did, but also the best. And then I found your dad, and I learned what real marriage was supposed to feel like. You deserve that too, honey. You deserve someone who chooses you every single day. I returned to Seattle with renewed determination. No more doubts, no more wondering if I was making the right choice. I'd seen what it looked like to walk away from something broken and rebuild something beautiful. Mom had done it. I could too. September came with cooler weather and increased tension. Rachel was 7 months pregnant now, and she'd stopped attending our usual activities completely. She claimed doctor's orders to rest, but I knew the real reason. She couldn't hide the pregnancy anymore, and she didn't want to face me. Daniel asked me in October if we could have Rachel over for dinner. He claimed she was going through a hard time with the pregnancy and needed friend support. The audacity was almost admirable. "Of course," I said sweetly. "She's my best friend. We should support her." That dinner was torture. Rachel sat across from me, visibly pregnant, barely eating, looking miserable. Daniel played the concerned friend, asking about her health, whether the father was involved, offering to help with anything she needed. "The father's being difficult," Rachel admitted, shooting a look at Daniel that I pretended not to notice. "He keeps saying he's going to step up, but there's always another excuse for why now isn't the right time. Men can be cowards," I said, looking directly at Daniel, "especially married men who make promises they have no intention of keeping." Daniel choked on his water. Rachel's face went pale, but I delivered the line in such a way that it seemed like generic advice, not a specific accusation. They couldn't be sure if I knew or if I was just making conversation. After Rachel left, Daniel was quiet and withdrawn. That night, he called his mother from the bedroom while I was supposedly watching television in the living room. "Iyama, I think Emma suspects something," he said in Korean, the way she was talking at dinner, about married men and broken promises. "She knows. I know she knows." "Don't be ridiculous," Mrs. Park replied. "Emma is oblivious. She's too trusting to see what's right in front of her face. You're just feeling guilty, but guilt is useless now. The situation is what it is. You manage it until after the holidays, and then we'll figure out next steps after the holidays, after Thanksgiving, after I'd already detonated their entire world and they'd realized exactly how oblivious I'd really been." November arrived with early snow and the final countdown to Thanksgiving. Mrs. Park called with menu planning, as she did every year. This time she added one more name to the guest list. "I've invited Rachel," she told me in English. "She's alone for the holidays, and she needs family support. You don't mind, do you?" "Of course not," I said warmly. "The more, the merrier." Mrs. Park sounded relieved. She'd probably expected me to object, but why would I object to my best friend attending Thanksgiving? Why would I object to the perfect audience for the reveal I'd been planning for 8 months? I spent the weeks before Thanksgiving practicing. In my car during lunch breaks, I'd recite the Korean phrases I needed. At night, when Daniel was working late or allegedly at the gym, I'd watch Korean dramas without subtitles, testing my comprehension. I'd become fluent enough to understand complex conversations, even if my accent wasn't perfect. Diana Chen walked me through what would happen after Thanksgiving. The divorce papers were ready to be filed. The evidence was documented and organized. My finances were separated. I'd opened new bank accounts that Daniel didn't know about and transferred my personal savings. I'd found an apartment and signed a lease that would start December 1st. "Are you ready for this?" Diana asked during our final pre-Thanksgiving meeting. "I've been ready since March," I said. "Now I'm just excited." Dr. Reeves was more cautious. "Emma, what you're planning is going to be traumatic for everyone involved, including you. Make sure you have support lined up for afterwards. This isn't going to feel as satisfying as you think it will. It's not about satisfaction," I explained. "It's about truth. They've been living in a lie, and I've been their accomplice. On Thursday, the truth comes out. Whatever happens after that, at least it'll be honest." The night before Thanksgiving, I barely slept. Daniel was snoring beside me, completely unaware that this was the last night he'd sleep in our bed. Tomorrow, everything changed. Tomorrow, I finally spoke. Shall I continue? Thanksgiving morning arrived with the kind of bright, cold clarity that seemed almost prophetic. I woke before dawn, Daniel still sleeping soundly beside me, and I lay there in the darkness, thinking about how this would be the last morning I'd wake up as his wife, at least emotionally. Legally, the process would take months, but emotionally, today was the end. I'd prepared my outfit the night before, choosing carefully. I wore a deep blue dress that Daniel had once told me brought out my eyes, paired with the pearl pearl necklace his mother had given me for our first anniversary. I wanted to look like the perfect daughter-in-law one last time before I destroyed that image forever. Daniel was unusually attentive that morning, bringing me coffee in bed and kissing my forehead. Happy Thanksgiving, Em. I know this year has been hard with the fertility stuff, but I'm grateful for you. For us. The lie rolled off his tongue so easily. I wondered if he even recognized it as a lie anymore, or if he'd convinced himself that he could genuinely love two women at once, that his double life was somehow sustainable. I'm grateful too, I said, and it wasn't entirely a lie. I was grateful, just not in the way he thought. I was grateful that I'd discovered the truth, grateful that I'd had the strength not to confront them impulsively, grateful that today I would finally be free. We drove to Mrs. Park's house in Linwood and Daniel's Tesla, the same car we'd driven to our wedding 3 years ago. The irony wasn't lost on me. That drive had been full of hope and nervous excitement. This drive was full of steely determination and carefully controlled rage. Mrs. Park's house was already bustling when we arrived at 2 in the afternoon. Daniel's aunt and uncle had flown in from California. His cousin James was there with his girlfriend, and sitting in the living room, looking enormously pregnant and uncomfortable, was Rachel. Our eyes met as I entered, and I saw something flicker across her face. Fear? Guilt? I smiled warmly and crossed the room to hug her, feeling her stiffen in my embrace. Rachel, look at you. You're glowing, I said brightly. How are you feeling? Tired, she admitted, her hand protectively over her belly. But okay. And the father? Is he being supportive? Her eyes darted to Daniel, who was hanging up our coats in the hallway. He's trying. It's complicated. Marriage usually is, I said sweetly, watching her face go pale. Mrs. Park swept into the room, resplendent in a traditional hanbok that she only wore for special occasions. She greeted Daniel with effusive affection in Korean, telling him how handsome he looked and how proud she was of him. Then she turned to me with a much cooler greeting in English. Emma, thank you for coming. Please, make yourself comfortable. Dinner will be ready in about an hour. The next hour was a masterclass in pretense. Everyone mingled, drinking wine and eating appetizers. Daniel's uncle asked about our plans for children, a question that had been asked at every family gathering for the past 2 years. Usually, I deflected with vague optimism. Today, I had a different answer prepared. Actually, we've decided to stop the fertility treatments, I said clearly, my voice carrying across the room. Conversations faltered. Everyone turned to look at me. Sometimes things happen in their own time, and you can't force them. Mrs. Park's expression tightened. Daniel looked confused. Rachel suddenly became very interested in her ginger ale. That's very wise, Daniel's aunt said kindly. Too much pressure isn't good for anyone. As we moved to the dining room for dinner, I felt my heartbeat accelerating. This was it. The moment I'd been planning for 8 months. The moment everything changed. The table was spectacular, as always. Mrs. Park had prepared traditional Korean dishes alongside American Thanksgiving standards. There was japchae, galbi, and kimchi next to turkey, stuffing, and cranberry sauce. It was a perfect representation of the cultural fusion she wanted her family to embody. We took our seats, and Mrs. Park began serving, directing traffic and making sure everyone's plates were full. I was seated between Daniel and Rachel, with Mrs. Park at the head of the table. She called for everyone's attention to make a toast. Family, she began in English, raising her glass. Today we are thankful for all our blessings, for success, for health, for the family we have and the family we will have soon. Her eyes drifted meaningfully to Rachel's pregnant belly. Everyone raised their glasses. Then Mrs. Park continued in Korean, her voice warm and affectionate. And we're especially grateful that some problems solve themselves without too much effort. Some people know when to step aside gracefully. She was talking about me, in front of me, assuming I couldn't understand. Daniel shifted uncomfortably beside me but said nothing. Rachel stared at her plate. No one else at the table spoke Korean except Daniel's aunt, who looked confused by the comment but didn't question it. I took a sip of my wine and waited. I'd learned patience these past months. I could wait a few more minutes. Dinner progressed with multiple conversations happening simultaneously. Daniel's uncle was discussing politics with James. The girlfriend was asking Mrs. Park about her hanbok. Daniel and Rachel were exchanging meaningful glances across the table that they thought no one noticed. Then Mrs. Park leaned toward Daniel and said quietly in Korean, "Have you talked to Rachel about the financial arrangements? She needs to understand that everything must be discreet. No public acknowledgement. The child gets support, but privately." "I've talked to her, Iyama," Daniel replied in Korean, his voice tight. "She's not happy about it, but she understands. She needs to be more than understanding. She needs to be grateful. Not every man would support a child in this situation." "What about Emma?" Daniel asked, still in Korean. "When do we tell her?" "We don't. Let her figure it out on her own eventually. Or perhaps she never does. She's simple enough that she might not put the pieces together." Simple. That word in Korean, dansunhan, hit me like a physical blow. Not just oblivious or trusting, but simple. Stupid. I set down my fork carefully and turned to face Mrs. Park directly. When I spoke, every word was in perfect, measured Korean. "Actually, Mrs. Park, I'm not simple at all. I've understood every word you and Daniel have spoken in Korean for the past 8 months. Every conversation, every plan, every cruel assumption that I was too stupid to learn your language." The table went silent. Completely. Utterly silent. You could have heard a pin drop on the hardwood floor. Mrs. Park's face went white, then red, then white again. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Daniel's wine glass slipped from his hand, red wine spreading across the white tablecloth like blood. "Emma, what? How?" I continued in Korean, my pronunciation clear and deliberate. "I know about the affair. I know about Rachel's pregnancy. I know that the baby is yours, Daniel. I know that you've been planning how to keep me in the dark while you support your new family. I know everything." Rachel started crying, her hands covering her face. The rest of the table looked between us in confusion, clearly not understanding the Korean conversation but sensing the catastrophic shift in atmosphere. I've been attending Korean language classes for 18 months, I said, switching back to English so everyone could understand. I wanted to connect with Daniel's heritage. I wanted to surprise him. And I did get a surprise, just not the kind I expected. Daniel's aunt stood up abruptly. What is happening? Daniel, what is she talking about? I looked around the table at all the confused, concerned faces. Then I looked at Rachel, still sobbing. And finally, I looked at Daniel, who seemed frozen in his chair, unable to speak or move. Rachel is pregnant with Daniel's child, I said clearly. They've been having an affair for over a year. Mrs. Park has known for months and has been helping Daniel plan how to support the child while keeping me as his wife for appearances. They've been discussing all of this in Korean right in front of me, assuming I couldn't understand. The explosion was immediate. Daniel's aunt began shouting at Mrs. Park in rapid Korean. His uncle demanded answers from Daniel. James's girlfriend looked horrified. Rachel ran from the table, her sobs echoing down the hallway. But I remained seated, calm, watching the chaos unfold around me with a strange sense of detachment. This was it. The truth was out. There was no taking it back, no smoothing it over, no maintaining the pretense anymore. Daniel finally found his voice. Emma, please, let me explain. Explain what? I cut him off, still speaking calmly. Explain how you watched me go through painful fertility treatments while you were actively trying to have a baby with someone else. Explain how you discussed with your mother which wife was more convenient to keep. Explain how you let me believe I was inadequate when the problem was never me. It was you. I never meant for this to happen, he said weakly. You absolutely meant for this to happen. Affairs don't just occur by accident. You made choice after choice after choice. You chose to sleep with my best friend. You chose to continue the relationship. You chose to let her get pregnant. You chose to lie to me every single day. Those were all conscious decisions, Daniel. Don't pretend you're a victim of circumstance. Mrs. Park had recovered enough to speak. You had no right to spy on private conversations, she said in English, her voice shaking with anger. Private conversations? I laughed, and it sounded harsh even to my own ears. You were having these conversations in my home, about my marriage, about my life. There was nothing private about it. The only thing you had was the assumption that I was too stupid to understand. But I wasn't. I was just patient. Daniel's aunt was still yelling at Mrs. Park in Korean, something about shame and family honor. Daniel sat with his head in his hands. Rachel had presumably locked herself in the bathroom, as I could hear her crying through the closed door. I stood up, smoothing my dress. I'm leaving now. Daniel, don't come home tonight. Actually, don't come home at all. I've rented an apartment and I'm moving out this weekend. My attorney will contact you about the divorce proceedings. Emma, wait. Daniel stood up, reaching for my arm. We need to talk about this. Work through this. I pulled my arm away. There's nothing to work through. Your marriage is over. It's been over since you decided to betray me. I'm just the last one to make it official. I walked toward the door, grabbing my coat from the hallway. Behind me, the arguing continued. Voices raised in English and Korean, accusations flying in both directions. But I didn't look back. As I reached for the doorknob, Rachel emerged from the bathroom, her face blotchy and tear-streaked. Emma, please, I'm sorry. I never wanted to hurt you. I turned to face her. This woman who had been my best friend since college, who I'd trusted with everything, who had systematically betrayed that trust in the most intimate way possible. You're not sorry you hurt me, Rachel. You're sorry you got caught. There's a difference. That's not fair. Fair? The word came out sharper than I intended. You want to talk about fair? You slept with my husband. You got pregnant with his child. You watched me go through fertility treatments knowing exactly why they weren't working. You sat at my dining table in my home and pretended to be my friend while carrying my husband's baby. Don't you dare talk to me about what's fair. I love him, she whispered. Then you can have him, I said simply. But you should know that a man who cheats with you will cheat on you. Ask yourself what happens when the pregnancy glow fades and reality sets in. When you're dealing with diapers and sleepless nights and he meets someone new at work. Will he be faithful to you or will you become me? The wife who gets betrayed while some new woman becomes you? I didn't wait for her answer. I walked out of Mrs. Park's house, got into my car, which I'd driven separately in preparation for this moment, and drove away. In my rearview mirror, I could see Daniel running out of the house, calling my name, but I didn't stop. My phone started ringing immediately. Daniel, Mrs. Park, Rachel. I turned it off and drove in silence to the apartment I'd rented, the one they knew nothing about, the one that represented my new life. When I arrived, I sat in the parking lot for a long moment, hands on the steering wheel, and finally let myself feel. 8 months of suppressed emotion hit me all at once. Anger, grief, betrayal, relief, freedom. I cried until I couldn't cry anymore. Then I went inside, changed into comfortable clothes, and ordered pizza. It was Thanksgiving, and I was spending it alone in an empty apartment, but somehow it felt right. This was my first meal as a woman who had chosen herself, who had refused to be diminished, who had spoken her truth in 2 languages. My phone was still off, but I turned it on briefly to send one text to Diana Chen. It's done. They know everything. Proceed with the filing. Her response came immediately. I'm proud of you. Rest tonight. Tomorrow we take them to court. I turned the phone off again and sat in the silence of my new apartment. Outside, families were probably gathered around tables, giving thanks, celebrating togetherness. Inside, I was alone, but I wasn't lonely. For the first time in 8 months, I felt like myself again. Not Daniel's wife, not Mrs. Park's inadequate daughter-in-law, not Rachel's naive friend, just Emma, just me, and that was enough. Would you like me to continue? The weekend after Thanksgiving passed in a blur of activity that left no time for second-guessing or regret. Diana Chen filed the divorce papers first thing Monday morning, and by noon, Daniel had been served at his office. The humiliation of being handed divorce documents documents at work in front of his colleagues was intentional. He'd humiliated me privately for months. Now he could experience public embarrassment. My phone had been ringing constantly since Thursday night, but I'd blocked Daniel, Rachel, and Mrs. Park. The only calls I accepted were from Diana, my parents, and surprisingly, Patricia Lynn, Rachel's mother. "Emma, I need to see you," Patricia said when I finally answered her call on Saturday morning. "Please, I just found out what Rachel did, and I need to talk to you face to face." We met at a small cafe in Fremont, far from any place we might run into mutual acquaintances. Patricia looked like she'd aged 10 years in 2 days. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her makeup hastily applied. "I am so sorry," she said immediately, her voice breaking. "I had no idea. Rachel told me the father was some consultant she'd met through work, that he was separated from his wife. If I'd known it was Daniel, if I'd known what they were doing to you, you couldn't have known," I said gently, despite my anger at Rachel. Patricia was another victim in this mess, a collateral casualty of her daughter's choices. "Rachel lied to everyone. She's been lying for over a year," Patricia said bitterly, "living in my house, eating my food, letting me be excited about becoming a grandmother, and the whole time she was destroying her best friend's marriage. I raised her better than this, Emma. I don't know where I went wrong. You didn't go wrong. Rachel made her own choices, adult choices. She doesn't get to blame her upbringing or her circumstances. She chose to sleep with a married man. She chose to continue the affair. She chose to get pregnant and think she could just take my place in Daniel's life." Patricia nodded, tears streaming down her face. "She's asking to stay with me, says she has nowhere else to go. But I don't know if I can look at her right now without feeling sick. What will you do? I don't know. She's my daughter. She's pregnant. But what she did is unforgivable." Patricia looked at me with something like desperation. "How are you so calm about all of this?" I considered the question. "I'm not calm. I'm just focused. I spent 8 months learning Korean, gathering evidence, preparing for this moment. Now that it's here, I don't have energy left for emotional breakdowns. Those will come later. Right now, I'm in survival mode." "The Korean thing," Patricia said with a sad smile. "Rachel told me. She said you'd been understanding their conversations for months, that you knew everything and just waited. I needed the evidence, and I needed them to truly reveal who they were. If I'd confronted them immediately, they would have had time to cover their tracks, to spin the narrative. This way, everything is documented. Every cruel word, every calculated plan, every assumption that I was too stupid to understand. You're stronger than I would have been," Patricia said admiringly. "I would have burned the house down." "The week isn't over yet," I said wryly, though I was joking, mostly. We talked for another hour. Patricia asked about the divorce proceedings, the division of assets, what my plans were. I shared what I could without violating attorney-client privilege, though Diana had been clear. I had an incredibly strong case. The adultery was documented. The fraud was evident. The emotional abuse was recorded. "Daniel's going to try to negotiate," Diana had told me during our Monday morning meeting. "His attorney called already. They want to settle out of court, avoid the publicity. But we hold all the cards here, Emma. We can push for everything you deserve." "I don't want everything," I'd explained. "I just want what's fair. Half the marital assets, which I'm entitled to. No alimony, I can support myself. But I want him to acknowledge what he did, publicly. No sealed records, no confidentiality agreements. The truth needs to be part of the public record." Diana had smiled at that. "They're going to hate that stipulation." "Good. They've been operating in shadows and secrets for too long. Time for some sunlight." Back at the cafe, Patricia was asking about my plans for the future. "Will you stay in Seattle? Move back to Florida with your parents?" "I'm staying," I said firmly. "I have a good job here. Friends who aren't Rachel. A life I built. I'm not letting Daniel and Rachel drive me out of my own city. They can be uncomfortable seeing me around. I'm done shrinking myself to make other people comfortable." Patricia squeezed my hand across the table. "You're going to be okay, Emma. Better than okay. You're going to thrive." I hoped she was right. The following week brought unexpected allies. 3 of Daniel's co-workers reached out to me privately, offering to testify if needed about Daniel's behavior at work. Apparently, he'd been quite open about his relationship with Rachel among his colleagues, framing it as a tragic love story where he was torn between obligation and passion. He told us his marriage was essentially over. One colleague, Jennifer, told me over coffee that you two were staying together for appearances, but that you'd both moved on emotionally. He made it sound like you had an understanding. "We had no understanding," I said flatly. "I was faithful to my marriage vows. I was trying to have a baby with him while he was having a baby with someone else. There was no understanding except the one he invented to justify his betrayal." Jennifer looked mortified. "I'm so sorry. We believed him. We even celebrated when Rachel announced her pregnancy. We thought it was this beautiful thing. I feel so stupid now." "Don't feel stupid," I said, though part of me wanted them to feel stupid. They'd enabled Daniel's narrative, made him feel justified in his choices. People believe what they want to believe. Daniel's good at presenting himself as the victim, but the truth always comes out eventually. The email I sent to Daniel's entire extended family was perhaps my most controversial move. Diana had advised against it, saying it might make me look vindictive in court, but I didn't care. I was done protecting Daniel's reputation. The email was simple and factual. "Dear Park family, I wanted to address what happened on Thanksgiving directly, rather than allow rumors to spread. Daniel has been having an affair with my close friend Rachel for over a year. She is currently 6 months pregnant with his child. This affair and pregnancy were kept secret from me while Daniel and his mother discussed how to manage the situation in Korean, assuming I couldn't understand their conversations. I've spent 18 months learning Korean to better connect with Daniel's heritage. Instead, I learned the truth about my marriage. I've filed for divorce and will be moving forward with my life. I'm sharing this not to create create drama, but because I believe in honesty and transparency. Many of you have asked me questions over the past few days. This is my answer. I wish you all well and hold no ill will toward anyone except those directly involved in deceiving me. Sincerely, Emma Park, soon to be Emma Taylor again. The responses were immediate and divided. Some family members expressed support and outrage on my behalf. Others accused me of airing private matters publicly. Daniel's aunt, the one who'd been yelling at Mrs. Park in Korean during Thanksgiving dinner, sent a particularly kind message. Emma, I'm so sorry for what my nephew and sister-in-law did to you. In our culture, family loyalty is sacred, but so is honesty and respect in marriage. You showed tremendous strength. If you ever need anything, please reach out. Mrs. Park predictably sent a scathing response accusing me of trying to destroy her family's reputation. I deleted it without reading past the first paragraph. Her opinion no longer mattered to me. By mid-December, the divorce proceedings were moving faster than expected. Daniel wanted it done quickly, probably to start his new life with Rachel and the baby without the encumbrance of a wife. I was fine with speed as long as I got what I deserved. His settlement offer came through Diana, 55% of marital assets, which was more than the standard 50%. He'd keep the house but buy out my half. I'd get the newer car, he'd keep his Tesla, all shared investment accounts would be split, and he'd agree to make the divorce proceedings public record, though he wanted a statement included that acknowledged mistakes on both sides. Absolutely not, I told Diana immediately. There were no mistakes on both sides. There was his betrayal and my discovery of it. I don't care if it means going to trial. I won't sign anything that implies I'm partially responsible for his affair. Diana negotiated for another week before coming back with a revised offer. 60% of marital assets, no statement about mutual fault, public record with no sealing of documents, and Daniel would pay all attorney fees for both sides. He must be desperate to settle, Diana observed. This is a very generous offer. Why? I asked suspiciously. What's the rush? Diana looked uncomfortable. His attorney mentioned that Rachel's due date is approaching, and Daniel wants to be free to embrace his new family when the baby comes. The knife of betrayal twisted again, even though I'd known this was coming. He wants to be divorced before his child is born so he can start fresh, like I never existed. Emma, I'll take the settlement, I interrupted. Not because I want to help him start fresh, but because I want to start fresh too. Sign it. Let's be done. The divorce was finalized 2 days before Christmas. I signed the papers in Diana's office, my hand steady, my heart surprisingly calm. Daniel hadn't been present. Washington State didn't require both parties to sign simultaneously. I wondered if he'd already signed, if he'd celebrated, if Rachel had been with him. How do you feel? Diana asked as I set down the pen. Free, I said honestly. Lighter, like I've been carrying a weight for months and finally put it down. What will you do now? Live my life on my terms, without anyone assuming I'm too simple to understand. I spent Christmas with my parents in Florida. Dad was responding well to treatment, and it felt good to be somewhere warm, somewhere without memories of Daniel on every corner. Mom made my favorite foods and didn't ask too many questions. Dad told terrible jokes and hugged me too tightly, as if he could squeeze out my pain through sheer paternal affection. You're going to be okay, baby girl, he said on Christmas Eve as we sat on their patio watching the sunset. Better than okay. You're going to be extraordinary. I already am extraordinary, I said, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. I just forgot for a while. On New Year's Eve, I was back in Seattle, standing on the balcony of my apartment with a glass of wine, watching fireworks light up the sky over Lake Union. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I almost didn't read it, but curiosity won out. Rachel had the baby this morning. A girl. 7 pounds, 3 ounces. I wanted you to know, even though I have no right to tell you anything. I'm sorry, Emma, for everything. I hope you find happiness. Daniel. I stared at the message for a long moment, feeling surprisingly little. No jealousy, no anger, just a distant acknowledgement of something that no longer concerned me. I deleted the text without responding. His baby, his life, his consequences. None of it was my problem anymore. As midnight approached and the countdown began, I raised my glass to my reflection in the glass door. To fluency, I said aloud. In languages, in truth, and in knowing your own worth. The clock struck midnight. The fireworks exploded in brilliant colors, and I, Emma Taylor, formerly Emma Park, stepped into a new year unburdened by lies. But the story wasn't over yet. Not quite. Would you like me to continue? January brought an unexpected phone call that would shift everything one final time. I was grading papers at my kitchen table on a Tuesday evening when my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Normally I wouldn't answer, but something prompted me to pick up. Emma Taylor, a woman's voice, professional and cautious. Speaking. My name is Dr. Sarah Mitchell. I'm the attending physician in the NICU at Harborview Medical Center. I'm calling because you're listed as an emergency contact for Rachel Lynn. My stomach dropped. There must be a mistake. I'm her ex-friend. I wouldn't be. According to our records, you've been listed since she filled out her intake paperwork in June. She never updated it. I'm calling because Rachel gave birth 4 weeks ago, and there have been complications. She's asked to speak with you. Why isn't Daniel there? He's the father. Dr. Mitchell's pause was significant. Mr. Park has been here, but there are some legal and medical issues that Rachel specifically wants to discuss with you. I can't share details over the phone, but she's quite insistent. Would you be willing to come to the hospital? Every logical part of my brain screamed to say no. Rachel had betrayed me in the worst possible way. I owed her nothing, but there was something in Dr. Mitchell's voice, a urgency that suggested this was more than just drama. I'll come, I heard myself say, but I'm not making any promises beyond listening. An hour later, I was walking through the sterile corridors of Harborview, following signs to the NICU. Dr. Mitchell met me outside the unit, a woman in her 50s babies with kind eyes and an exhausted expression. Before you see Rachel, I need to explain the situation, she said, guiding me to a small consultation room. The baby Claire was born with several complications, heart defect, respiratory issues, and we've recently discovered she has a rare genetic condition called DiGeorge syndrome. She's going to need multiple surgeries and lifelong medical care. That's terrible, I said sincerely, but I don't understand why you've called me. Rachel's been here almost constantly since the birth, but she's showing signs of severe postpartum depression complicated by the trauma of Claire's condition. Mr. Park visits, but according to Rachel, his mother has been pressuring him to distance himself from both Rachel and the baby. Apparently, the baby's medical issues are seen as an embarrassment to the family. I felt a cold rage settling in my stomach. Of course, Mrs. Park would view a sick baby as an embarrassment rather than a grandchild who needed love and support. The same woman who'd called me inadequate was now abandoning her own flesh and blood because the child wasn't perfect. Where's Rachel's mother? Patricia? She visits, but Rachel's relationship with her has been strained since the circumstances of the pregnancy came to light. Rachel says you're the only person she trusts to tell the truth about what she should do. The irony of Rachel wanting truth from me after lying for over a year wasn't lost on me, but there was a baby involved now, a sick baby who hadn't asked for any of this. Can I see her? I asked. Rachel was in a private room near the NICU, looking smaller and more fragile than I'd ever seen her. Her hair was unwashed, her face pale and drawn. When she saw me, she started crying immediately. Emma, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I know I have no right to ask you for anything, but I don't know who else to turn to. I pulled up a chair but kept my distance, not ready for physical comfort. Dr. Mitchell explained about Claire's condition. I'm sorry, that must be incredibly difficult. She's so small, Rachel whispered, so fragile, and the doctors say she'll need surgery within the next few weeks. But Emma, Daniel's backing away. His mother told him that a defective child wasn't what they planned for, that he should reconsider his involvement. Defective? The word made me nauseous. That's what Mrs. Park said, in Korean, when she thought I couldn't understand. But I've been learning too, trying to connect with her. And I heard her tell Daniel that Claire's condition was probably genetic from my side, that this was why he should have stayed with proper family planning instead of getting involved with me. The cruelty was breathtaking even for Mrs. Park. What does Daniel say? He says he needs time, that this isn't what he expected, that maybe I should consider adoption because he's not ready to be a father to a child with special needs. Rachel's voice broke completely. He wanted me when I was pregnant and uncomplicated. Now that the reality is hard, he's running away. I thought about my own fertility struggles, the desperation I'd felt wanting a child. And here was Daniel, with a living, breathing daughter who needed him, and he was considering walking away because she wasn't perfect. What do you need from me, Rachel? I need to know if I did this to you too, if this is who Daniel really is, someone who runs when things get difficult, or if this is my karma for what I did to you. I took a deep breath, considering my words carefully. This isn't karma, Rachel. Claire's condition isn't punishment for your mistakes. It's a medical reality that has nothing to do with morality. But yes, this is who Daniel is. He's someone who takes the easy path, who wants the appearance of doing the right thing without the actual work. He wanted you when you were exciting and new. He wanted me when I made him look good to his colleagues. Now he wants neither of us because we've both become complicated. I destroyed your marriage for this, Rachel said bitterly, for a man who won't even fight for his own daughter. You destroyed my marriage for a fantasy, I corrected. You thought Daniel was different with you than he was with me. But people don't change fundamentally. They just find new situations to reveal who they've always been. We sat in silence for a moment before Rachel spoke again. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Do you think I can do this alone? Raise Claire by myself with all her medical needs? Honestly, I don't know. It's going to be incredibly hard. But Rachel, you're stronger than you think. You managed to maintain a double life for over a year. That took planning and strength. If you channel that energy into being Claire's advocate and mother, you might surprise yourself. Will Daniel's family help at all? I thought about Mrs. Park's callous dismissal of her own granddaughter. I doubt it. They're more concerned with appearances than actual family loyalty. But Rachel, there are resources. Support groups for parents of children with special needs, government assistance programs. Your mother, despite everything, loves you. She'll help when she processes everything. Rachel nodded slowly. I'm going to keep her. Claire, I'm going to fight for her even if Daniel won't. Even if his family abandons us. She's my daughter, and she deserves someone who'll fight for her. For the first time since Rachel's betrayal, I felt a flicker of respect for her. That's the first truly brave thing I've heard you say. Emma, I know I can never make up for what I did to you. I destroyed our friendship and your marriage, but thank you for coming. Thank you for being honest with me when I've never been honest with you. I stood to leave and paused at the door. Rachel, can I ask you something? When did you realize Daniel wasn't who you thought he was? She was quiet for a long moment. The first time he suggested I should get an abortion because the timing wasn't right. That was month 3. I said no, and he got angry, really angry. That's when I saw the real Daniel. But by then, I was too invested in the fantasy to walk away. That's the difference between us, I said softly. I walked away the moment I saw the real Daniel. You stayed because you thought you could change him or that his love for you was different. It wasn't. It never is. I left Rachel's room and walked down to the NICU viewing window. Through the glass, I could see rows of tiny incubators with even tinier babies fighting for life. A nurse pointed out Claire when I asked, a small form with wires and tubes, but unmistakably fighting. She had Daniel's nose, I noticed, and possibly Rachel's eyes, so it was hard to tell. She was innocent in all of this. A life caught between the consequences of adult choices. My phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. I heard you visited Rachel at the hospital. This doesn't concern you anymore. Stay stay out of our lives. I typed back quickly, "You're right. Your daughter's medical crisis doesn't concern me. But I visited because Rachel asked me to, not because of you. And Daniel, I hope Claire never knows that her father considered abandoning her because she wasn't perfect. She deserves better than you." I blocked his number immediately after sending it. Walking out of the hospital into the cold January night, I felt something shift inside me. The anger I'd been carrying for months, the betrayal and hurt, it wasn't gone, but it had transformed into something else. Clarity, maybe, or perspective. Daniel and Rachel had blown up my marriage for a fantasy that collapsed the moment reality intruded. Mrs. Park's perfect family image had shattered when her granddaughter wasn't the ideal she'd envisioned, and I, who they'd all dismissed as simple and inadequate, was the one who'd landed on my feet. 3 months later, in early April, I received an email from Patricia Lynn. Rachel had moved back home with Claire, who'd undergone successful heart surgery and was slowly gaining strength. Daniel visited occasionally, but had hired a lawyer to negotiate minimal child support while avoiding any real rental responsibility. Mrs. Park had cut off contact entirely with both Rachel and Claire. "Rachel asks about you sometimes," Patricia wrote, "not asking for forgiveness, just wondering how you are. I told her you're teaching and living your life. I thought you'd want to know that despite everything, Claire is fighting and Rachel is rising to the challenge of motherhood. Thank you for visiting that night at the hospital. Whatever you said made a difference." I wrote back briefly, "I'm glad Claire is doing better. Tell Rachel that being a good mother is the best apology she can make, not to me, but to her daughter. And tell Claire when she's old enough to understand that her father's limitations are his, not hers." Would you like me to continue to the epilogue? 2 years after Thanksgiving, I stood in front of my 4th grade class teaching a lesson on resilience using Korean and English. The bilingual program I'd proposed to the school district had been approved, and I was now teaching cultural exchange twice a week. Resilience, I wrote on the board in both languages, doesn't mean you don't get hurt. It means you don't let the hurt define who you become. One of my students, a 9-year-old named Sophie, raised her hand. "Ms. Taylor, did something bad happen to you? Is that why you know about resilience?" I smiled, thinking about how to answer truthfully but age appropriately. "Yes, Sophie. Someone I trusted hurt me very badly, but instead of staying hurt, I learned new skills and became stronger. Sometimes the worst things that happen to us lead to the best versions of ourselves." After school, I met my new boyfriend, Marcus, at a coffee shop near the school. We'd met at a Korean language meetup group 6 months ago. He was a divorced father of 2, a software engineer who'd lived in Seoul for 3 years and genuinely loved Korean culture. He was kind, honest, and most importantly, he saw me as an equal partner. "How was your day?" he asked, sliding a latte across the table to me. "Good. I taught the kids about resilience today, and it made me think about how far I've come. You ever regret how things went down with Daniel? The public nature of it?" I considered the question, one I'd asked myself many times over the past 2 years. No, I needed the truth to be public because they'd kept me in the dark for so long. Secrets give power to the wrong people. Truth takes that power back. Marcus nodded. He knew my whole story and had never judged me for how I'd handled it. "Have you heard anything about them lately?" I hadn't sought out information about Daniel or Rachel, but news traveled in ways you couldn't always control. Last I'd heard through mutual acquaintances, Daniel had been passed over for a major promotion at work. The public divorce proceedings had made some of his colleagues question his character, and apparently, his boss valued family integrity highly. Mrs. Park had retired from her position at the Korean Community Center after several members resigned in protest of how she'd treated Claire. Rachel was still living with Patricia, working part-time as a nurse while caring for Claire. The little girl had undergone 3 surgeries but was thriving developmentally despite her challenges. Rachel had started a blog about raising a child with DiGeorge syndrome, and surprisingly, it had gained a following. She'd found purpose in advocacy that her self-centered affair with Daniel had never provided. "I heard through Patricia," I told Marcus, "that Rachel wanted to reach out to apologize again, but I asked Patricia to tell her that's not necessary. The apology I needed was seeing her become a better person, not hearing empty words. That's generous of you." "It's not generosity, it's boundaries. I forgave Rachel for my own peace, not for her benefit. But forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. She's building a life focused on her daughter, and I'm building a life focused on myself. Those paths don't need to intersect." That evening, I attended a school district meeting where they were voting on expanding the bilingual programs to more schools. Several parents spoke in support, including one Korean-American mother who specifically mentioned my class. "Ms. Taylor's class taught my daughter that being bilingual is a gift, not a burden," she said. "And more than that, she taught her that understanding others' languages means you can't be deceived." My daughter came home last week and said, "Mommy, Ms. Taylor says that learning language is learning power. I want that for all our children." The program was approved unanimously, and afterward, the district superintendent approached me. "Emma, we'd like you to train other teachers in implementing bilingual cultural exchange programs. Are you interested?" This was the career opportunity I'd been working toward. Absolutely. "When do we start?" As I drove home that night, my phone rang, an unknown number, but I answered it, no longer afraid of unexpected calls from my past. "Emma, this is Daniel." I almost hung up, but curiosity stopped me. "What do you want, Daniel?" "I wanted to tell you that I'm getting married to someone new, someone from work. I thought you should know." The news should have hurt, but instead I felt nothing but mild surprise that he'd called to tell me, "Congratulations. I hope you're honest with her in ways you weren't with me." That's actually why I'm calling. Linda, my fiancé, knows everything about what happened. The affair, the baby, all of it. And she asked me to call you to apologize. She says she won't marry me until I make things right with the people I've hurt. "Smart woman," I said dryly. "Is she making you call Rachel and Claire too?" His silence was answer enough. "I see," I continued. "So you're apologizing to me but still ignoring your daughter. That's very on brand for you, Daniel. Claire has special needs I'm not equipped to handle. None of us are equipped for parenthood until we choose to be, I said firmly. You're not avoiding Claire because you're unequipped. You're avoiding her because she's difficult, and you've never been good at difficult things. You prefer easy paths and easy women. That's not fair. Fair would have been you being faithful to your marriage vows. Fair would have been you supporting your child regardless of her medical needs. Fair would have been you being honest from the start. But life isn't fair, Daniel, and neither am I. Not anymore. Emma, I'm trying to make amends. No, you're trying to check a box so your new fiancé will marry you. Real amends would be you establishing a relationship with your daughter. Real amends would be you financially supporting Claire's medical care without Rachel having to beg or negotiate. Real amends would be you becoming the man you pretended to be when we got married. I could hear him breathing heavily on the other end of the line. I didn't call to be lectured. Then why did you call? If not for a lecture, then what? Absolution? Permission to move on with your life? You don't need my permission, Daniel. You already moved on while we were still married. But if you want my blessing for your new marriage, here it is. I hope Linda knows exactly who she's marrying. I hope you're honest with her. And I hope she's strong enough to leave if you're not. Are you happy now? He asked suddenly, his voice bitter. Did destroying my reputation make you feel better? I didn't destroy your reputation. Your choices did that. I just refused to help you maintain the lie. And yes, Daniel, I'm happy. Happier than I ever was with you. I'm building a career I'm proud of, dating someone who respects me, and sleeping well at night because I'm not lying to anyone. Can you say the same? He hung up without answering. I sat in my car for a moment, processing the conversation, then smiled. 2 years ago, a call from Daniel would have wrecked me for days. Now it was just a minor interruption in my evening. Marcus texted, "Dinner at my place? The kids want to show you the kimchi we made together." I replied, "On my way. Can't wait to try it." At Marcus's house, his 2 children, Emma and Jackson, aged 10 and 8, proudly presented their kimchi-making efforts. It was adorably messy, probably too spicy, and absolutely perfect in its imperfection. "Ms. Taylor, Dad said you speak Korean really good," Jackson said, mixing up his grammar in the way kids do. "Can you teach us some words?" We spent the next hour with Korean language flashcards, the kids giggling as they mispronounced words, Marcus correcting their technique with patient kindness. This, I thought, was what family was supposed to feel like. Not perfect, but honest. Not easy, but worth the effort. Later, after the kids were in bed, Marcus and I sat on his porch with wine, watching the Seattle skyline light up against the night. "Daniel called today," I told him. "He's getting remarried and wanted to apologize." "How'd that go?" "Exactly as you'd expect. He's still avoiding Claire, still taking the easy path, still unable to understand why people might find his choices problematic. Do you think he'll ever change?" I considered the question. Maybe. People can change if they're willing to do the difficult work of self-examination. But change requires admitting you are wrong, and Daniel's too invested in being the victim of circumstance. He'll probably repeat the same patterns with his new wife eventually. That's sad. It is, I agreed, but it's not my sadness to carry anymore. He made his choices. Rachel made hers, Mrs. Park made hers, and I made mine. We're all living with the consequences now. No regrets about how you handled it? The public reveal, the divorce, all of it? My only regret is that I didn't trust my instincts earlier. There were signs before I discovered the affair, moments when I felt something was off, but I ignored them because I wanted to believe in my marriage. Now I know that if something feels wrong, it probably is. Trust yourself first, verify later. Marcus raised his glass. To trusting yourself. I clinked my glass against his. And to building a life where you don't need to speak 2 languages to understand what's really being said. 3 months later, I received a letter from Rachel. Not an email, not a text, but an actual handwritten letter that arrived in my mailbox on a Saturday afternoon. "Emma, I know you asked Patricia to tell me not to reach out, but there's something I need to say, and I need to say it directly. Claire asked me yesterday who her father is. She's only 3, so I kept the answer simple. But eventually she'll ask more complex questions. She'll want to know why he's not in her life, and I'll have to explain that her father couldn't handle the reality of who she is. When I tell her that story, I'll also tell her about you, about how you showed up at the hospital when you had every right to stay away, about how you gave me the truth I needed to hear, even when I'd never given you that same honesty. I'll tell her that sometimes the kindest people are the ones we've hurt the most, and that true strength isn't about avoiding pain. It's about choosing how we respond to it. I'm not asking for friendship or forgiveness. I'm just thanking you for being the example of integrity that I failed to be. You speaking Korean that Thanksgiving, revealing everything we'd hidden, it was the consequence I deserved. But more than that, it was the wake-up call I needed. Claire is thriving. She's funny and stubborn and brilliant. She has another surgery scheduled next month, but her doctors are optimistic. Mom has been incredible, and I've found a community of other parents with special needs, children who understand the journey. Daniel rarely visits and never stays long. Mrs. Park sent money once, anonymously, but we sent it back. We don't need charity from people who view us as embarrassments. What we need, what I'm working to provide, is love and stability and honesty, the things I failed to give you. Thank you for showing me what those things look like. Rachel. I read the letter twice, then folded it carefully and placed it in a drawer. I didn't write back, but I was glad she'd sent it. Not because I needed another apology, but because it showed Rachel was becoming the person she needed to be for Claire. That night, Marcus asked if I wanted to join him and the kids on a trip to visit his parents in Oregon during spring break. It was a significant step, meeting his family, integrating more deeply into each other's lives. "I'd like that," I said, meaning it completely. "The kids are already planning what Korean phrases they want to teach Grandma and Grandpa." I laughed. "They're going to be fluent before they know it." "Well, they have a good teacher, one who knows that language is power, and power comes from understanding the truth, even when people try to hide it. He kissed me then, sweet and uncomplicated. A kiss with no secrets behind it, no betrayal lurking beneath the surface. Just honest affection between two people who'd been hurt before and chose to trust again anyway. As I drove home that night, I thought about the woman I'd been on that Thanksgiving 2 years ago. The woman who'd sat at Mrs. Park's table, listening to Korean conversations that they thought she couldn't understand, planning the perfect moment to reveal the truth. That woman had been hurt and angry and determined to expose the betrayal. She'd been right to do what she did, but she'd also been someone whose identity was still partially tied to being Daniel's wife, Rachel's friend, Mrs. Park's daughter-in-law. The woman I was now had shed all those identities. I was Emma Taylor, bilingual teacher, resilience expert, girlfriend, friend, daughter. My relationships were built on honesty now. My strength drawn from authenticity rather than performance. I thought about the Korean word jinsil, meaning truth. It was one of the first words I'd learned when I started studying the language. At the time, I'd thought I was learning it to better understand my husband's culture. Instead, I'd learned it to understand my own truth. And that truth was simple. I deserved better. I deserved honesty, respect, and love that didn't require decoding or translation. I deserved a life where I didn't have to speak multiple languages just to understand what was really being said. And now I had it. If someone ever asks if speaking Korean changed my life, I can answer honestly, yes, but not in the way anyone expected. It didn't help me connect with my husband's heritage. It didn't save my marriage. It didn't make me fit into a family that had never really wanted me. Instead, it gave me the tools to save myself, to hear the truth hidden in plain sight, to gather the evidence I needed to build a new life, to stand up at that Thanksgiving table and say, in 2 languages, that I was done being underestimated. That's the real power of language, of any kind. Not just communication, but revelation. The ability to understand what's really being said, to expose what people try to hide, and ultimately, to speak your own truth with clarity and strength. So when people ask if I recommend learning a second language, I say absolutely. You never know what truths you might uncover or what strength you might find when you finally understand every word being said around you. What did you think of this story? Have you ever discovered a betrayal in an unexpected way? Did the way Emma handled the situation feel satisfying or too calculated? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this story. Thank you for listening to the end.